If you've just been throwing on the old synth arpeggiator and playing your favorite Nils Fromm songs, then you've probably noticed that chords, no, back up, other way around, arpeggios are just chords. Way to spoil the ending. So then why don't we treat our arpeggios the same way we treat our chords, as a progression, rather than just something that provides some rhythmic interest while we do other stuff underneath it. Today, I want to just look at one technique that we can expand upon to get a lot of ideas out of, and I think it's a fundamental thing to understand when working with arpeggios. It will absolutely help make your arpeggios less boring, dare I say, and more interesting like your chord progressions can be. And maybe we can even coax some melodic ideas out of them as well. When I teach this piece to my piano students, one of the first things that I try to convey to them is that it's not just a bunch of arpeggios. Okay, it is a bunch of arpeggios, but once I can convince them that it's not just a bunch of arpeggios, they can start to see how everything connects a bit more clearly. And I think this piece is a perfect way to teach arpeggios to students in general. Turns out that Bach was a fairly clever fellow, so there's a lot more going on under the surface than meets the eye. So the first thing that I do for them is play the piece like this. And I think as electronic musicians, this piece can teach us an incredible amount as well. The first thing that I need in order to do this is to start with an interesting chord progression, and I'm just going to play it blocked. That's really the secret. I'm giving away the secret at the beginning. Come up with a good, solid blocked chord progression, and then arpeggiate it from there. And I'll show you some techniques and some specific ways to do that. So here I have a progression that I've written in the linear or horizontal style that I teach in my composition ebook, which is absolutely free. It's the first link in the description below. A lot of people have downloaded it and found it helpful. It's there for you too if you'd like to check it out. I also have an entire video about this that I'll include in the end screen, but don't go to that just yet. So even in just playing this blocked chord progression, you can see that it has a melodic shape to it. The two most important parts, the melody, which is the top voice, and the bottom voice, the bass, are almost independent from one another. They never double, and they move a lot of times in contrary motion, in opposite directions. This is some basic part writing stuff that, again, the ebook will help you with. I'm using the piano for now, and we'll talk about how it translates to synthesizers, and I'll show you some examples of using it there in just a second. But the piano has some important concepts that I think we can show what's going on very clearly. So I could do a simple up pattern like you would find on any synth arpeggiator. I could do it with a simple down pattern. Here's why I wanted to demonstrate this on the piano first. If you'll notice, I'm bringing out certain parts. Usually the top voice is the melody in piano writing, and that's what most pianists are trained to voice towards. This is voicing. This is how we sort of orchestrate at the piano. So each voice has its own hierarchy, and we can change what's most important within the arpeggio, within the chord, by bringing out certain notes, and that's just done through technique at the piano. And that is something that we're going to address again when we get to the synthesizer and we can figure out how to translate that idea, that concept, to a synth. So here is a simple mixed pattern where I'm using both up and down motion between the two different hands, and I'm also bringing out different notes so that they have a melodic implication. You can almost pick out a melody within these arps, and it works really nicely as a melody because we've shaped the chord progression in a nice way where the two outer voices are kind of independent and they feel like they could stand on their own. Another one of my favorite techniques is to strip things down. It's almost a subtractive method. So here I have some extended tertian chords that I'm using, and I can strip those down and just choose certain notes that I feel like leave some things to the imagination. And then I just add those other notes in as I repeat this sort of looping pattern. And that's a really effective way to build something up throughout the course of a track. So I could start simple and gradually add more and more, and all the while working out these different melodic ideas based on what I'm voicing towards. All right, now to the part that I'm sure you've been waiting for. We translate this to a synthesizer, and I'm going to use the Moog Muse down there to demonstrate. I could do the exact same thing. I could do simple up, down. In those examples, I was having some trouble lining things up with the bar. I wasn't listening to the click, and I did have it synced to my DAW. So that can lead to some kind of weird syncing issues with the arps. And this is something that I actually kind of discovered accidentally, but then started using intentionally. And that's anytime that you miss a sync point or are a little bit off with the chord change, or you change the number of notes in each chord. The arpeggiator is going to continue to repeat the chord, but it's going to completely change the feel. It's going to give you that sort of one leg longer than the other feel that an odd meter might give you. But we're still locked into the grid, and we're still locked into the same number of chords, and they're taking up the same amount of time. They're just repeating in different ways, and I use that in my own music all the time. If you've listened to it, you've heard it. So if you remember, I demonstrated things on the piano to demonstrate voicing, and we can approximate that with the velocity on the filter envelope. So that's what I'm going to do here. I can just bring out certain notes where the filter opens up a little bit more on those notes, and because it's an arpeggiator, even though this is not a polyphonic aftertouch keyboard, it's still going to bring out that note every time it round robins through. The great thing about music technology and electronic music instruments like a synthesizer is that we can use chants and generative things in our music, and if we control those in a certain limited way, they can be incredibly effective even to accomplish what we want to accomplish. In this case, to bring out certain notes, even though I won't necessarily know which ones, and that's kind of an interesting way to discover new ideas, new melodic implications that we might not otherwise. In this example, I'm going to do that by applying a sample and hold LFO that's going to be synced with the clock. So every time I go through one of these steps, it's going to open or close the filter to a random amount that I've set so that it doesn't get too crazy. And that's going to serve the same purpose of just providing an accent here and there. I'm just never going to know exactly where that accent is going to fall. Now let's say we're still not hearing that top voice as much as we want to. We can always just, since we've written it in this linear style, double that top voice with another instrument or another synth. Just another texture that will complement and bring that voice out. It's like orchestration. One final thing that I'll touch on is the bass line, at the risk of getting into another video entirely. In fact, I may make an entire video on bass lines and how I truly believe that changing the bass line will change every single thing that happens over it, just by changing the bass. So if I apply that principle to this progression really quickly, we can see how we could get a B section with the same chords over the top just by changing the root note or the bass note underneath. And I'll talk more about that in a future video. So block those arpeggios. Think about where you want your chords to go from one to the next, and then your arpeggios will start to progress much in the same way that your chords progress. To me, the beauty is combining the performed world with the programmed world and figuring out how those generative elements that I talked about start to interact with my human intuition as I play an instrument. That's the beautiful thing about it to me. That's where I can just lose hours in this room playing around with these things, and it's what most of my music is built around, the combination of performance and programming. So if you want to see that bassline video, subscribe to this channel, I guess, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.